The acrid smell of burnt coffee filled the kitchen as Laura Martinez fumbled with the machine, her trembling hands betraying her exhaustion. Outside, the early morning fog cloaked Toronto's skyline, muting the city's usual vibrancy. Laura squinted at her reflection in the kitchen window, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. Dark circles shadowed her once bright brown eyes, and her shoulders slumped with an invisible weight. At 35, she felt decades older. "Laura, where's my blue tie?" Daniel's sharp voice cut through the silence, making her flinch. The coffee maker gurgled ominously. It's in the second drawer, dear," she called back, her voice barely above a whisper. She could hear him rummaging aggressively through the dresser upstairs. Laura quickly poured the coffee into a travel mug, wincing as a few drops splashed onto her crisp white blouse. She dabbed at the stain frantically, knowing Daniel's reaction if he noticed. With practiced efficiency, she applied a touch of concealer to hide the evidence of another sleepless night, smoothed her dark hair into a neat ponytail, and donned her favorite charcoal blazer. As she grabbed her laptop bag, Daniel appeared in the doorway, his imposing figure blocking her exit. "You're wearing that?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. Laura's heart sank as she looked down at her carefully chosen outfit. I thought it looked professional," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. Daniel scoffed. "Professional? You look like you're trying too hard. Change the blouse, at least." Laura opened her mouth to protest but thought better of it. "Okay," she said softly, hurrying past him to the bedroom. As she changed, she could hear Daniel in the kitchen, loudly complaining about the coffee. The streetcar ride to work was a blur of faces and buildings. Laura's mind wandered to her latest project at Maple Leaf Advertising, a vibrant campaign for a local eco-friendly startup. A small smile tugged at her lips as she imagined the colors and shapes coming to life on her screen. It was in these moments of creativity that she felt truly alive, truly herself. But as quickly as it came, the smile faded. Daniel's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "Playing with colors all day? When are you going to get a real job, Laura?" The TTC streetcar lurched to a stop, jolting Laura back to reality. She hurried off, her heels clicking against the pavement as she navigated the busy sidewalks of downtown Toronto. The city buzzed with energy suits rushing to Bay Street, tourists gawking at the CN Tower, students hurrying to classes at U of T. Yet amidst the crowd, Laura felt utterly alone. As she rode the elevator to her office, Laura steeled herself for the day ahead. She took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of printer ink and coffee that permeated the agency. For a few precious hours, she could lose herself in her work, in a world where her ideas mattered and her voice was heard. But as the elevator doors opened, her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel, a stark reminder of the reality waiting for her at home. The clinking of silverware against fine china filled the upscale Yorkville restaurant, a symphony of wealth and pretense. Laura sat rigid in her chair, hyper-aware of every movement, every word. Across from her, Mrs. Thompson laughed a little too loudly at one of Daniel's jokes, her diamond necklace catching the soft light. Laura could feel the weight of Mr. Thompson's gaze as he turned his attention to her. "So, Laura," his booming voice drew her focus. "Daniel tells me you're still doing that little drawing job. Any plans to move up in the world?" The scent of expensive perfume and aged whiskey mingled in the air, making Laura feel slightly nauseous. She opened her mouth to respond, but Daniel cut in smoothly, his hand gripping her knee under the table. "Oh, you know how it is, Jim. Some people just aren't cut out for the big leagues." Laura felt a familiar ache in her chest, a mixture of hurt and anger that she quickly suppressed. She forced a smile, taking a sip of her wine to avoid speaking. The rich red liquid felt bitter on her tongue. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced smiles and swallowed retorts. By the time they stepped out onto the rain-slicked streets of Yorkville, Laura felt drained, as if every ounce of her spirit had been poured out onto that pristine tablecloth. The drive home was tense, the silence broken only by the swish of windshield wipers and the distant rumble of thunder. Laura watched the city lights blur through the rain-streaked window, each flash of lightning illuminating her reflection, a woman she barely recognized anymore. As they entered their condo, the storm outside mirrored the tempest brewing within. The sharp scent of Daniel's cologne filled the space as he shrugged off his jacket, tossing it carelessly onto the couch. "God, Laura, could you have been any more embarrassing?" Daniel's words lashed out, sharp and cutting. stuttering like a schoolgirl when Jim asked you about work. It's like you're determined to make me look bad. Laura felt something snap inside her. The accumulated frustration of years bubbled to the surface. Make you look bad? Daniel, I barely said 2 words all night because you wouldn't let me get a word in edgewise. Daniel's eyes narrowed dangerously, his face flushing with anger. Oh, so now it's my fault? Maybe if you had anything worthwhile to say, I wouldn't have to cover for you. Face it, Laura. Your little doodles aren't a real career. It's time you grew up and got a real job. My little doodles pay half the bills for this place. Laura shot back, surprising herself with her vehemence. Her hands shook as she gestured around the sleek, modern condo. And I love my job. I'm good at it. Why can't you see that? Love doesn't pay for vacations or that watch you're wearing, Daniel sneered, stepping closer. Laura could smell the whiskey on his breath. Wake up, Laura. You're living in a fantasy world. Without me, you'd be nothing. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Laura felt as if she'd been slapped. She stared at Daniel, this man she'd promised to love forever, and saw a stranger, cold, cruel, and utterly indifferent to her pain. In that moment, something fundamental shifted within Laura. The fear and self-doubt that had been her constant companions for years began to give way to a new emotion: anger. Not just at Daniel, but at herself for allowing this to go on for so long. The next morning, Laura moved through her routine on autopilot, her mind still reeling from the previous night's confrontation. As she waited for her coffee to brew, the rich aroma a stark contrast to the bitterness in her heart, she found herself staring at her phone, thumb hovering over a familiar name: Maya Thompson. Maya had been her best friend since childhood, a constant source of warmth and understanding. But over the years, as Daniel had slowly isolated Laura from her support system, their conversations had become less frequent, more superficial. The thought of reaching out now, after so long, made Laura's stomach churn with anxiety. Taking a deep breath, inhaling the comforting scent of coffee, Laura pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Laura was about to hang up when Maya's voice, tinged with surprise and concern, came through the speaker. Laura, is everything okay? The simple question was enough to break the dam. Words poured out of Laura about Daniel's behavior, her fading sense of self, the suffocating fear that had become her constant companion. Through it all, Maya listened, offering gentle encouragement and unwavering support. Oh, Laura, Maya said softly when she'd finished. I had no idea things were so bad, but I'm so proud of you for reaching out. You're not alone in this, okay? We'll figure it out together. For the first time in what felt like years, Laura felt a glimmer of hope. She ended the call with a promise to meet Maya for coffee that weekend, her heart lighter than it had been in months. At work, Laura threw herself into her projects with renewed vigor. As she was putting the finishing touches on a logo design, the vibrant colors on her screen a stark contrast to the gray cubicle walls around her. A voice startled her out of her concentration. That's really impressive work. Laura looked up to see Ethan Ramirez, the new art director, smiling at her. She felt a blush creep up her cheeks, unused to such direct praise. The scent of his cologne, subtle and fresh, was a pleasant change from the stale office air. Oh, thank you, she stammered. It's just a rough draft, though. Ethan shook his head, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Don't sell yourself short. Your use of negative space here is brilliant. Have you ever thought about leading your own campaigns? Laura blinked, taken aback. She could feel the curious glances of her co-workers, unused to seeing her engaged in conversation with the higher-ups. No, not really. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of responsibility. Well, I think you are, Ethan said firmly. There's an upcoming project for a local women's shelter. I think your style would be perfect for it. Would you be interested in taking the lead? For a moment, Laura hesitated, Daniel's disparaging words echoing in her mind. But then she thought of Maya's encouragement, of the anger and determination she'd felt the night before. She straightened in her chair, meeting Ethan's gaze. Yes, she said, surprising herself with her conviction. Yes, I'd love to. As Ethan walked away, Laura felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't just the praise or the opportunity. It was the realization that someone saw value in her work, in her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with possibility, a future where her voice was heard and her talents recognized. The road ahead would be difficult, she knew. But with Maya's support and this new spark of confidence, Laura felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The first step towards reclaiming her life had been taken. There was no going back now. The harborfront center bustled with weekend activity, the air filled with the scent of fresh pretzels and the sound of street performers. Laura navigated through the crowd, her heart racing as she approached the lakeside cafe where Maya waited. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her mind, each step feeling like a silent rebellion against the life she'd known. "Laura!" Maya waved from a table overlooking Lake Ontario, her smile as warm and inviting as Laura remembered. The familiar sight eased some of the tension in Laura's shoulders. As they settled in with their coffees, the aroma of freshly ground beans mingling with the breeze off the lake, Laura found herself pouring out her fears. "I want to leave him, Maya. But where would I go? How would I manage financially? And what will people say?" Maya reached across the table, squeezing Laura's hand. The touch was comforting, grounding. "Those are all valid concerns, sweetie. But let's break them down one by one." They spent the next hour discussing practical matters, the cost of apartments in different Toronto neighborhoods, Laura's salary and savings, the legal implications of separation. Maya, who worked as a financial advisor, helped Laura create a preliminary budget, her expert fingers flying over the calculator. "It'll be tight," Maya admitted, sliding the paper with neat columns of numbers towards Laura. "But it's doable, especially if you get that promotion Ethan hinted at." Laura nodded, but her eyes were distant, fixed on a couple walking hand in hand along the waterfront. "It's not just the money, though. Daniel, he's been a part of my life for so long. What if I can't make it on my own?" "Oh, honey." Maya's voice was gentle but firm. She leaned forward, her eyes locking with Laura's. "You've been making it on your own for years. Daniel hasn't been supporting you. He's been holding you back." As the sun began to set, painting the lake in hues of orange and pink, Laura felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges. But for the first time, she could see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. On the streetcar ride home, the familiar rattle and hum of the vehicle a comforting backdrop, Laura overheard a couple arguing in hushed, tense voices. She watched as the woman's face crumpled, the man's words clearly cutting deep. It was like looking into a mirror of her own life, and the realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just about her anymore. By staying silent, by accepting Daniel's treatment, she was tacitly approving it. What message was she sending to other women trapped in similar situations? As she walked into the condo she shared with Daniel, the weight of her decision settled on her shoulders. The scent of his cologne lingered in the air, once comforting but now almost suffocating. It wouldn't be easy. There would be judgment, financial struggles, lonely nights. But the cost of staying, the slow erosion of her spirit, the suffocation of her dreams, was far greater. Daniel glanced up from his laptop as she entered, his eyes narrowing. "Where have you been?" he asked, his tone carrying a hint of accusation. Laura took a deep breath, straightening her spine. For once, she didn't rush to explain or apologize. "Out," she said simply, meeting his gaze steadily. "I needed some air." Something in her tone made Daniel's eyes narrow further, but Laura was already heading to the bedroom, each step feeling like a small victory. The journey ahead was daunting, but she was finally ready to take that first crucial step. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of subtle changes and quiet determination for Laura. At work, she threw herself into the women's shelter campaign with a passion that surprised even her. The agency's office became a sanctuary, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards and the soft whir of printers a soothing backdrop to her newfound purpose. Late nights at the office became common, each hour spent refining concepts and perfecting layouts feeling like a small act of rebellion. The glow of her computer screen illuminated her face as she worked, casting shadows that seemed to retreat with each confident brushstroke of her digital pen. Ethan's encouragement was constant, his feedback pushing Laura to explore new creative territories. "You have a unique voice, Laura," he told her one evening as they reviewed her latest designs, the scent of coffee strong in the air. "Don't be afraid to let it shine." At home, Laura began setting small boundaries, each one a test of her growing resolve. She started saying no to social engagements she didn't want to attend, the word feeling foreign but empowering on her tongue. She stood her ground when Daniel criticized her choices, the tremor in her voice lessening each time. She carved out time for herself, whether it was a yoga class at the community center, where the scent of incense and the sound of deep breathing helped center her, or a quiet hour reading in High Park, the rustle of leaves and chirping of birds a balm to her soul. Daniel noticed the changes, his reactions swinging between confusion, anger, and attempts at reconciliation. "Come on, babe," he'd say, his tone wheedling as he poured himself another glass of whiskey. "Let's go out tonight, just the two of us, like old times." But Laura stood firm, the memory of Maya's words bolstering her courage. "Not tonight, Daniel. I have work to do." Each refusal felt like flexing a long dormant muscle, painful at first, but gradually becoming stronger. Her friendship with Maya deepened, their weekend coffee dates becoming a lifeline. They explored the city together, rediscovering Laura's love for Toronto's diverse neighborhoods and vibrant culture. In Kensington Market, surrounded by the colorful street art and the scent of exotic spices, Laura found herself laughing freely for the first time in years. "You know," Maya said, as they browsed through a vintage clothing store, the smell of old leather and musty fabric tickling their noses. "I always loved your style. Remember how you used to dress in university? So bold and creative." Laura fingered a brightly patterned scarf, the silk smooth against her skin. A small smile played on her lips. "I'd forgotten about that," she admitted. "Daniel always said I needed to dress more professionally." Maya's eyes flashed, her hand closing over Laura's. "Well, Daniel's an idiot. This scarf? It's totally you." Impulsively, Laura bought the scarf. Wearing it to work the next day, the bright colors a stark contrast to her usual muted tones, she felt a surge of confidence. Coworkers commented on the change, their surprised but approving glances boosting her spirits further. As the women's shelter campaign progressed, Laura found herself deeply moved by the stories of survival and resilience she encountered. Each testimony she read, each photo she carefully selected, resonated with her own struggle. It wasn't just a job anymore. It was a calling, a way to give voice to those who had been silenced. The change in Laura didn't go unnoticed by Daniel. As she grew more confident, more assertive, his behavior became increasingly erratic. Some days, he was the charming man she'd fallen in love with, bringing home flowers that filled the condo with their sweet fragrance and suggesting romantic dinners at their favorite restaurants. Other days, his words dripped with sarcasm and thinly veiled threats, the tension in the air so thick it felt hard to breathe. "So you're working late again?" he asked one evening as Laura packed up her laptop, his tone deceptively casual. The clink of ice in his whiskey glass punctuated the silence. "Funny how that started happening right after that new art director joined your team." Laura felt her chest tighten, but she kept her voice steady, determined not to let him see how his words affected her. "Ethan is my colleague, Daniel. And yes, I'm working late because I'm leading an important campaign." Daniel's laugh was harsh, grating against Laura's nerves. "Leading? Come on, Laura. We both know you're not cut out for leadership. Don't let these people fill your head with delusions." The words stung, but Laura refused to let it show. She zipped up her bag with more force than necessary, the sound sharp in the tense atmosphere. "I'm more capable than you think," she said quietly, turning to face him. She felt Daniel's eyes on her, could almost taste the tension in the air. But for once, she didn't back down, didn't apologize for asserting herself. After a long moment, Daniel stormed out of the room, the slam of the door echoing through the condo. At work, Laura poured her frustrations and fears into her designs. The women's shelter campaign was taking shape, powerful and evocative. The images on her screen seemed to pulse with emotion, each color and line carefully chosen to convey strength and hope. But as the deadline approached, Laura found herself second-guessing every decision. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe in the confines of her cubicle. "What if it's not good enough?" she confided in Ethan during a late-night review session, the office eerily quiet around them. "What if I'm not good enough?" Ethan's response was immediate and firm. He leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers across the desk. "Laura, look at what you've created. It's not just good, it's exceptional. You need to start believing in yourself as much as the rest of us do." His words warmed her, chasing away some of the doubts that had plagued her for so long. As she rode the streetcar home that night, Laura found herself standing a little taller, her reflection in the window showing a woman she was starting to recognize and admire. But the peace was short-lived. As soon as she walked through the door of their condo, she sensed something was wrong. The air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Daniel was waiting for her, his face a mask of cold anger. "I called your office earlier," he said, his voice dangerously low. The smell of whiskey was strong on his breath. Ethan answered. "Said you were in a meeting. Funny, I don't remember you mentioning any meeting." Laura felt her heart rate quicken, but she forced herself to remain calm. "It was a last-minute thing. We're on a tight deadline." "Right," Daniel sneered, stepping closer. "A deadline? Is that what they're calling it these days?" "What are you implying, Daniel?" Laura's voice was steady, masking the turmoil within. Daniel stepped closer, his presence looming over her. "I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you that this stops now. The late nights, the important projects. You're making a fool of yourself, and of me." For a moment, Laura felt the old fear creeping in, the instinct to apologize and retreat. But then she thought of the women from the shelter, of Maya's unwavering support, of Ethan's belief in her abilities. She thought of the person she was becoming, the person she wanted to be. Drawing herself up to her full height, Laura met Daniel's gaze. "No, Daniel," she said, her voice low but firm. "The only thing that stops now is you telling me what I can and can't do. I'm done living in your shadow." The shock on Daniel's face would have been comical if the situation wasn't so tense. As Laura brushed past him towards the bedroom, she felt a curious mix of terror and triumph. The confrontation she'd been both dreading and longing for was coming, and soon. But for the first time, she felt ready to face it head-on. The distillery district buzzed with weekend energy, the cobblestone streets echoing with laughter and conversation. Laura hurried past the quaint boutiques and artisanal shops, their enticing aromas of freshly baked bread and roasted coffee barely registering as she made her way to meet Maya. Her confrontation with Daniel the night before had left her shaken, yet strangely empowered. Maya was already seated at an outdoor table of their favorite cafe, her face lighting up as she spotted Laura. The wrought iron chair scraped against the stone as Laura sat down, the sound momentarily drowning out the ambient chatter. "There you are! I ordered your usual," Maya said, pushing a steaming latte towards Laura. The familiar scent of cinnamon and espresso was comforting. As Laura settled into her seat, Maya's smile faded, concern etching lines around her eyes. "What's wrong? You look like you've been through the ringer." Laura took a deep breath, inhaling the soothing aroma of her coffee, and recounted the previous night's events. Maya listened intently, her expression a mix of concern and pride. "Oh, Laura," Maya said softly when she finished. "I'm so proud of you for standing up to him. But there's something I need to tell you, something I should have shared a long time ago." Maya's eyes darted around nervously before settling back on Laura. The clinking of cups and saucers from nearby tables seemed to fade into the background as Maya leaned in closer. "Remember Tom? My ex from university?" Laura nodded, recalling the charming man Maya had dated for nearly 2 years. "Well," Maya continued, her voice barely above a whisper, He was abusive. Not physically at first, but the emotional manipulation, the constant put-downs, the isolation from friends and family. It was all there." Laura felt her heart constrict, the latte suddenly bitter on her tongue. "Maya, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me?" "I was ashamed," Maya admitted, tears welling in her eyes. She blinked rapidly, her gaze fixed on the intricate patterns of the wrought iron table. "I thought I was strong, independent. How could I let someone treat me that way?" "But Laura, that's exactly what abusers do. They chip away at your self-worth until you don't recognize yourself anymore." As Maya shared her story, the gradual escalation, the moment she decided to leave, the challenging but ultimately liberating aftermath, Laura felt a surge of emotions, anger at what her friend had endured, admiration for her strength, and a growing resolve about her own situation. "It wasn't easy," Maya concluded, wiping away a tear. "But leaving Tom was the best decision I ever made. I found myself again, built a career I love, met David. I want that for you too, Laura. You deserve so much better than what Daniel's giving you. Laura reached across the table, squeezing Maya's hand. The warmth of the touch seemed to flow through her, strengthening her resolve. Thank you for sharing this with me. I think I needed to hear it. As they parted ways, Laura felt a newfound strength coursing through her veins. Maya's story had illuminated the path ahead, showing her not just the challenges, but the possibilities that awaited. Walking through the cobblestone streets of the distillery district, Laura's phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Great news! The shelter loves your campaign. Presentation to the full board next week. You've got this... A smile spread across Laura's face. She looked up at the historic buildings around her, their sturdy structures having weathered centuries of change. In that moment, Laura felt just as resilient. The road ahead would be difficult, but with friends like Maya and opportunities like this campaign, she knew she could face whatever came her way. The day of the board presentation dawned bright and clear, Toronto's skyline crisp against the blue sky. Laura stood before the mirror in her and Daniel's bedroom, adjusting her new blazer, a purchase she'd made without asking for permission, a small act of defiance. The fabric was smooth under her fingers, its deep blue color a stark contrast to the muted tones she usually wore. Another late night at the office? Daniel's voice came from the doorway, dripping with sarcasm. The familiar scent of his cologne, once comforting, now seemed cloying and oppressive. Laura met his gaze in the mirror, her heart racing but her voice steady. It's a big day. The board presentation for the Women's Shelter campaign. Daniel scoffed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. Right, your little pet project. Don't get your hopes up, Laura. You know how these things usually go for you. Something snapped inside Laura. All the pent-up frustration, anger, and hurt of the past years came rushing to the surface. She turned to face him, her voice clear and unwavering. No, Daniel. I don't know how these things usually go for me, because you've never given me the chance to find out. But that ends today. Daniel's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed dangerously. The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done, Laura said, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. Done with the put-downs, the control, the constant erosion of my self-worth. I deserve better, and I'm going to get it, with or without you. For a moment, Daniel seemed at a loss for words. Then his face contorted with anger, his voice rising. You ungrateful bitch, he spat. After everything I've done for you, you'd be nothing without me. The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. But instead of shrinking back as she once would have, Laura stood her ground. No, Daniel, she countered, her voice gaining strength. I was someone long before I met you, and I'll be someone long after you're gone from my life. You didn't make me. You tried to break me. But guess what? You failed. She grabbed her bag and moved towards the door, the strap firm in her grip, anchoring her. Daniel blocked her path, his larger frame intimidating. You're not going anywhere, he growled, reaching for her arm. Laura jerked away, adrenaline surging through her veins. Don't touch me, she warned, her voice low and dangerous. I'm leaving, Daniel. Not just for today, but for good. I'll be back for my things later. You'll never make it on your own, Daniel sneered, but Laura could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. You'll come crawling back within a week. Laura paused at the doorway, turning to face him one last time. The man she once loved now seemed small, his anger a thin veil for his own insecurities. No, I won't, she said firmly, because I'm stronger than you ever gave me credit for. Goodbye, Daniel. With that, she walked out of the condo, out of the suffocating life she'd endured for too long. Her hands shook as she pressed the elevator button, and she half expected Daniel to come charging after her. But the doors closed, and she was alone. As soon as she stepped out of the building, the busy street enveloping her in its familiar rhythm, Laura pulled out her phone and dialed Maya. It's done, she said, her voice trembling. I told him I'm leaving. Oh, sweetie. Maya's voice was a mix of concern and pride. Are you okay? Where are you? Laura took a deep breath, the crisp morning air filling her lungs. I'm okay, she realized, surprising herself. I'm heading to the office. I have that presentation, remember? Laura, are you sure? You've just been through something major. Maybe you should reschedule. No, Laura said firmly, her stride purposeful as she headed towards the subway station. I need to do this. For me. She could almost hear Maya's smile through the phone. Okay then. You go show them what you're made of. I'll meet you after, and we'll figure out next steps. I'm so proud of you, Laura. As Laura navigated the familiar streets to her office, she felt as if she was seeing Toronto through new eyes. The city seemed brighter, full of possibility. She thought of all the women who had walked this path before her, leaving abusive situations, reclaiming their lives. She wasn't alone. Entering the office building, Laura caught her reflection in the polished doors. The woman looking back at her stood tall, eyes bright with determination. For the first time in years, Laura recognized herself. Ethan met her at the elevator, his face creased with concern. Laura, are you all right? You look... I'm fine, Laura interrupted, managing a small smile. Better than fine, actually. Let's go knock their socks off. As they walked into the boardroom, Laura felt a calm settle over her. Whatever happened next, with her career, with her living situation, with her life, she knew one thing for certain. She was finally, truly free. The weeks following Laura's departure from Daniel's life were a whirlwind of change and emotion. She moved in temporarily with Maya, transforming the spare room into a makeshift sanctuary. The scent of fresh paint and new beginnings filled the air as Laura hung her newly purchased colorful scarf on the wall, a reminder of her growing independence. There were difficult moments. The day she returned to the condo to collect her belongings, escorted by Maya and a police officer as Daniel glowered silently. The first night she lay awake in her new bed, the unfamiliar creaks and shadows of Maya's apartment playing tricks on her mind. The awkward conversations with colleagues who noticed her missing wedding ring, their curious glances following her through the office. But for every moment of doubt, there were triumphs that reinforced her decision. The Women's Shelter campaign was a resounding success, earning Laura accolades from the board and a promotion to senior designer. The constant hum of congratulations and the warm glow of achievement buoyed her spirits. She found an affordable apartment in a vibrant neighborhood near High Park, its tree-lined streets and diverse community welcoming her with open arms. As she filled her new space with colors and textures that reflected her rekindled creativity, Laura felt a sense of ownership over her life that she hadn't experienced in years. Most importantly, Laura began the process of rediscovering herself. She joined a support group for women leaving abusive relationships, finding strength and solidarity in shared experiences. The circle of chairs in the community center became a safe haven, filled with stories of struggle and triumph. She rekindled old friendships and forged new ones, slowly rebuilding the support network that Daniel had systematically dismantled. Weekend brunches, movie nights, and impromptu gatherings became regular fixtures in her calendar. Each shared laugh and genuine conversation healing a little more of her battered self-esteem. One sunny Saturday, Laura found herself wandering through the art gallery of Ontario, losing herself in the vibrant canvases. The quiet murmur of fellow art enthusiasts and the faint smell of oil paints created a cocoon of tranquility around her. As she stood before a particularly striking piece, its bold colors and decisive strokes resonating with her own journey, she felt a presence beside her. Beautiful, isn't it? A warm voice commented. Laura turned to see Ethan, his eyes crinkled in a friendly smile. Ethan, I didn't know you came here. Every weekend, he admitted, his gaze returning to the painting. It's my form of meditation, I guess. Would you like to join me for coffee after? As friends? He added quickly, noticing her hesitation. Laura considered for a moment, then nodded. I'd like that. As they sat in a nearby cafe, the rich aroma of coffee enveloping them, Laura felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't romantic interest. She wasn't ready for that yet, but the simple joy of connecting with someone who saw her, truly saw her, for who she was. That evening, as Laura prepared dinner in her new apartment, the sizzle of vegetables in the pan a comforting soundtrack, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her stood taller, her eyes brighter, her smile more genuine. She wasn't fully healed. There were still moments of doubt, nights when the loneliness felt overwhelming. But she was healing, growing stronger every day. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Proud of you, girl. Don't forget, yoga in the park tomorrow. Laura smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. As she moved around her kitchen, she hummed softly to herself, enjoying the simple pleasure of making choices. What to eat, what to wear, how to spend her time, without fear of criticism or reprisal. Outside her window, the Toronto skyline glittered in the fading light. Laura paused to take in the view, feeling a surge of gratitude for this city that had cradled her through her darkest times and was now witnessing her rebirth. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, Laura looked to the future with hope and excitement. She was free, she was strong, and she was finally, truly, herself. A year had passed since Laura's life-changing decision, and Toronto's autumn painted the city in vibrant hues of red and gold. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves and new beginnings as Laura stood before a small audience in a community center, her heart racing but her voice steady as she shared her story. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she began, looking out at the faces of women who had experienced similar struggles. The room was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of movement or muffled sniffle. "A year ago, I was trapped in a life that wasn't my own. But with support, courage, and a lot of hard work, I found my way out. And so can you." The women's support group had become an integral part of Laura's healing journey. Initially attending as a participant, she now volunteered as a mentor, offering hope and guidance to those still finding their way. The weight of responsibility sat comfortably on her shoulders, a reminder of how far she'd come. After the meeting, a young woman approached her, eyes brimming with tears. The scent of fear and desperation, so familiar to Laura, clung to her like a second skin. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Your story. It's given me the courage to leave. I didn't think I could do it, but now I know it's possible." Laura hugged her gently, remembering her own fears and doubts. The embrace was warm, a silent transfer of strength and understanding. "You're stronger than you know," she assured the woman, "and you're not alone." As Laura left the community center, she breathed in the crisp autumn air, filling her lungs with possibility. The city bustled around her, but she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Great news! The eco-friendly startup loved your pitch. Dinner to celebrate?" A smile played on Laura's lips as she typed her reply. Over the past year, her friendship with Ethan had deepened, slowly blossoming into something more. They were taking it slow, both aware of the importance of maintaining their professional relationship and respecting Laura's healing process. Later that evening, as they strolled through Kensington Market after dinner, the area alive with the sounds and smells of its diverse community, Ethan turned to her. "You know, I'm really proud of you, Laura. Not just for the pitch, but for everything you've accomplished this year. You're amazing." Laura felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling that was becoming wonderfully familiar. "Thank you," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "I'm proud of me too." As they walked, Laura reflected on the changes in her life. Her career was thriving. She was now leading her own team at the agency, her innovative campaigns earning industry recognition. She had reconnected with old friends and made new ones, building a support network that uplifted and inspired her. Most importantly, she had rediscovered herself. The vibrant, creative woman who had been buried under years of emotional abuse was re-emerging, stronger and more resilient than ever. There were still challenges, of course. Healing was an ongoing process, and there were days when the weight of her past felt heavy. But Laura had learned to be gentle with herself, to celebrate her progress rather than dwelling on her setbacks. As they reached Laura's apartment building, Ethan gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Same time next week?" he asked, his eyes warm with affection and respect. Laura nodded, a soft smile on her face. "I'd like that." Watching Ethan walk away, Laura felt a flutter of excitement for the future. For the first time in years, she was truly looking forward to what lay ahead. She was writing her own story now, and the possibilities were endless. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when Laura had walked out of Daniel's life and into her own. The Toronto skyline had changed, new towers reaching towards the sky. But the transformation in Laura's life was even more profound. She stood at the podium of a conference hall, addressing a room full of marketing professionals. The familiar buzz of anticipation filled the air as she prepared to speak. Her latest campaign, focused on empowering survivors of domestic abuse, had just won a prestigious industry award. As she spoke about the inspiration behind the campaign, Laura's voice rang with confidence and passion. "Our experiences shape us, but they don't define us," she concluded, her eyes scanning the attentive faces before her. "It's what we choose to do with those experiences that matters." As applause filled the room, Laura caught sight of Ethan in the audience, his face beaming with pride. Their relationship had grown stronger over the years, built on a foundation of mutual respect, support, and shared dreams. The golden band on her left hand caught the light, a symbol of their recent commitment to each other. Later that evening, as they walked hand in hand along the shores of Lake Ontario, the gentle lapping of waves a soothing backdrop, Laura reflected on her journey. She thought of the scared, doubting woman she had been, and marveled at how far she had come. She was now a respected creative director, a mentor to young professionals, and a vocal advocate for domestic abuse survivors. But more than any professional accomplishment, Laura was proud of the personal growth she had achieved. She had learned to love herself, to set boundaries, and to live life on her own terms. As the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Ethan turned to her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, his thumb tracing circles on her hand. Laura smiled, squeezing his hand. "The future," she replied, her eyes bright with anticipation. "And how excited I am to see what it holds. The Laura of 5 years ago could never have imagined this life, full of love, purpose, and endless possibilities." But as she stood there, watching the stars begin to twinkle over Toronto, Laura knew that this was just the beginning. Her story was still being written, and the best chapters were yet to come. What did you think of Laura's attitude? Would you do the same? Leave a comment with your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm sure there will be new videos to surprise you. Like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our next videos. See you soon.